content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families.
They vanish in the night, in the sky, and in the wilderness, and even in their homes. No goodbyes, no trace, just silence, and questions that never find answers. A ship drifts across the Atlantic, cargo dry, lifeboats untouched. Dinner is still warm, but not a single crew member in sight. A colony disappears from the coast of North Carolina, leaving behind only a word, Croatoan, carved in wood. A plane with 239 souls on board simply vanishes from the sky. No distress signal, no wreckage, just thin air over the Indian Ocean. Hikers disappear from national parks in a bizarre, unexplained patterns documented in Missing 411. One moment they're in plain sight, the next they're just gone. And in West Virginia, a family's home is engulfed in flames on Christmas Eve. 5 Sodder children are believed to be dead, but as the ashes cool, no bodies were ever found. From the Mary Celeste to the lost colony of Roanoke, from flight MH370 to the vast American wilderness, to the haunting mystery of the Sodder family. These are not just disappearances. They are vanishing acts that defy reason, logic, and sometimes even physics. Tonight we're unraveling the strange and chilling phenomenon of mass disappearances, ghost ships, lost colonies, missing planes, children swallowed up by fire, or something even worse. So with that being said, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Wendy Schrader. I know I was supposed to do this episode last Sunday, but Dave decided to go and break his ankle, so I had to come up with an episode that I already had pre-recorded, but I hope you enjoyed it. But tonight I wanted to talk about mass disappearances. I mean, I can understand that, one or two people go missing and can't find them, but when you have like a whole group of people, that defies logic to me. Where would a whole group of people just vanish and disappear with no trace, no communication, nothing? Are these cover-ups, conspiracies, supernatural phenomenon, or are they just a series of unfortunate events? But let's get this party started with this, and let's start off with a little something light. And when I mean light, I mean a lighthouse. That's Flannan Isles Lighthouse, that is, in 1900. One of the most enduring maritime mysteries in British history took place December of 1900 on an isolated Flannan Isle, a remote rocky island outlet in Scotland's Outer Hebrides. These isles, wide-swept and desolate, were home only to seabirds and lighthouses, managed by 3 experienced keepers. James Ducat, he was the principal keeper. Thomas Marshall, he was the second assistant. And Donald MacArthur, occasional keeper, he would fill in for the other guys from time to time. Now, on December 26, 1900, the relief vessel Hesperus arrived later than scheduled due to bad weather. Now, the lighthouse, normally a beacon of activity and light, was eerily silent. The flag wasn't flying. There was no sign of life. A landing party went ashore and found the door to the lighthouse locked. Inside, a strange scene awaited them. The clock had stopped, a meal had been prepared but never eaten. Two of the three oiled skin coats were missing, suggesting two of the men had gone outside, but curiously, MacArthur's coat remained on its hook, even though he was known for never stepping out without it. Stranger still, the logbook included cryptic entries allegedly describing a powerful storm, unusual tension, and an uncharacteristic fear among the men. One account even claimed that MacArthur had been crying, which was extremely out of character for the seasoned former soldier. However, the logbook account is controversial. Many historians believe it was later a fictional addition, as the official Northern Lighthouse Board, the NLB, they have a lighthouse board. I'm sorry, that just threw me off. But they report there were no mentions of it. What is known from the official report is that the west landing platform had sustained significant storm damage. Heavy iron railings were bent, a large rock weighing over a ton had been displaced, and ropes were strewn across the area, signs consistent with an erroneous wave or powerful gust. Now, the occasional conclusion was there may have been a massive rogue wave that may have struck while the men were attempting to secure a storage box or rescue equipment during the storm. Now, theories suggest that two of the men went out to fix the storm damage, and MacArthur, seeing a danger from inside, rushed out to warn or help them. And all three were being swept away by a sudden gust of wind or a big rogue wave. Yet the story refuses to fade into history and maritime accidents. The mystery had fueled numerous theories, from the mundane to the supernatural. Speculations have included that a fight or murder self-harming event happened between the keepers, abduction of foreign spies, sea monsters, and other supernatural forces. And yes, this was proposed alien abduction. I'd probably put my money on that one. No trace of keepers were ever found, and the incident inspired poetry books like the films and songs, including Wilfred Wilson Gibson's 1912 poem, Flannan Isles, which helped popularize the eerie version of the tale. Now, to this day, Flannan Isles mystery captures the imagination, a chilling reminder of how nature, isolation, and the unknown can still defy explanation. Wow, can you imagine being like a lighthouse keeper during a storm and have to go out there and fix stuff? Man, it gets rough on those rocks. I mean, I go to North Carolina when I was a kid all the time, and when those seas get rough up against those rocks, yeah, my guess is that they were probably swept out to sea by wind or a rogue wave. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool though, the story behind it. Alien abduction. Could it have been sea monsters? Maybe a Nessie-like character decided to have a little snack. Now we're going to go to the sunny coast of California, where we're going to figure out what happened to the Yuba County Five. On the night of February 24th, 1978, five men from Yuba County, California, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Weiher, and Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathis set off on a road trip that should have been routine. They had planned to attend a college basketball game at the California State University in Chico, but mysteriously vanished after the event. All five men had varying degrees of intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions, though they were functional and led relatively normal lives. Now, the group never returned home. Their families immediately knew something was wrong, especially since all five men were known to be highly routine driven and would not willingly just disappear. Now, days later, their Mercury Montego was discovered abandoned on a remote snowy mountain road in Plymouth National Forest, far off their intended route, and 70 miles from Chico, California. Now, the car was not struck. It had enough gas, suggesting that they could have been driving and continued to drive. There was no apparent mechanical issue, leaving investigators baffled as to why they had even stopped. Now, months later, in June 1978, after the snow had melted, searchers found the decomposed remains of 4 of the men in the surrounding wilderness. Ted Wyher's body was discovered inside a Forest Service trailer 19 miles from where the car was abandoned. Disturbingly, the trailer contained sufficient amount of food and heating materials, yet Wyher had died of starvation and hypothermia. His feet were badly frostbitten, and he had nearly lost 100 pounds. It appeared that someone had been taking care of him for some time. His beard was grown out, and used blankets were found nearby. Now, the nearby trailer, the skeletal remains of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga were found. Shortly after that, Jack Hewitt's bones were located about 2 miles away. Only Gary Mathis' body was never recovered. Mathis, a U.S. Army veteran diagnosed with schizophrenia, had been doing well on medication and was close friends with the other men. Now, his shoes were found inside the trailer, suggesting he may have ventured out into the woods wearing Wyher's footwear, possibly to help find him. Now, while the men took a detour into the snowy wilderness, remains one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Investigators floated theories ranging from foul play to misdirection due to mental confusion. Now, some family members believe that the group was fleeing from an unknown threat or had been lured there. Others speculate that they may have been followed by someone they had trusted or tried to help someone in distress. Now, no one knows why the 5 men left a working car in the middle of nowhere or how they even became trapped in the bitter cold of the Sierra Nevada. Now, the case of the Yuba County Five remains one of California's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Eerie, tragic, and shrouded in unanswered questions. Yeah, what a bizarre thing. Why wouldn't they try and get back to the car? What would lure these men to go into the forest in the middle of winter, not knowing where they're at? I mean, something had to have made them pull over and draw them out of their car. Very strange case. And obviously the family felt the same way. They like, there's something ain't right here. This does not sit well with us, but who knows? Maybe one day we'll figure it out. But that's a bizarre, mysterious case that has many unanswered questions. That's for sure. Now we're going to go over to the East Coast. We're going to take a look at one of America's oldest cold cases, and that is the lost colony of Roanoke. Now, only a few historical mysteries have captured the imagination of the public, quite like the disappearance of the lost colony of Roanoke. It's a story that begins with ambition, hope, and perilous voyage across the Atlantic and ends in complete eerie silence. Over 400 years later, the fate of more than 100 English men, women, and children remains one of the most enduring enigmas of the early colonial era. Now, there was a first attempt to a settlement there. The seeds of mystery were planted in 1584 when Sir Walter Raleigh, that's why it's Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, granted a charter by Queen Elizabeth I, sought to establish England's first permanent colony in the New World. Now, an initial expedition explored the Outer Banks of present-day North Carolina, identifying Roanoke Island as a potential site. A small group of settlers made landfall in 1585, but due to the tension with local native tribes and lack of supplies, the first colony failed and returned to England the following year. Now, in 1587, a new group of 115 colonists, this time women and children, set sail to Roanoke under the leadership of Governor John White. Now, among the settlers were White's daughter Eleanor Dare and her husband Ananias Dare. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor gave birth to the first English child born in the Americas, a baby girl named Virginia Dare, a symbolic new beginning for the colony. But within weeks, it became clear that the settlers were dangerously short on supplies. Now, the colony persuaded Governor White to return to England and plead for assistance. Reluctantly, White departed, leaving behind his family and the rest of the settlers, promising to return quickly. Now, unfortunately, White's return was far from swift. Upon arriving in England, he found the country embroiled in a war with Spain. Queen Elizabeth had commandeered nearly every available ship for defense of the realm, especially against the looming threat of the Spanish Armada. It would be 3 long years before John White could secure passage back to Roanoke Island. But when he finally returned on August 18, 1590, ironically on what would have been his granddaughter Virginia's third birthday, what he found upon arrival was chilling. The entire colony vanished without a trace. There were no signs of struggle, no remains, no graves, no survivors. The palisade and structures had been carefully dismantled rather than destroyed. The only clues were cryptic carvings, the word Croatoan etched in the wood post, and the letters CRO carved in a nearby tree. Importantly, there was no cross carved beneath the message, which the colonists had agreed would be a sign of distress or danger. This led White to believe that the settlers had willingly relocated to the Croatoan island, present-day Hatteras Island, about 50 miles south. However, poor weather and rough seas and damaged ship prevented any further search. Heartbroken and defeated, White returned to England, never to see his family or colonists again. Now, there have been theories and speculations that have been bandied about for centuries. One of them has been integration with native tribes. The most widely accepted theory is that the colonists assimilated with friendly local tribes such as the Croatoan or the Lumbee tribes. Later, explorers reported encountering indigenous people with gray eyes and European-style speech. Now, in the 1600s, Jamestown settlers were told by local tribes that some of the Roanoke colonists have lived among them. Now, there's also massacre by hostile tribes or even the Spanish conquistadors. Obviously, England was at war with Spain, but some historians believe that the colonists may have been killed by hostile tribes like the Powhatan or the Spanish forces operating out of Florida who wished to eliminate any English presence in the region. Now, obviously, starvation and disease could have taken out the whole colony because a lot of colonists had succumbed to famine and disease and died. So that could have been something that happened to them. But you would think that there would be some trace of people or, graves or something. But, even they even think that maybe there were some theories that they got a ship and tried to sail back to England and maybe their boat capsized and they all were lost at sea. But there's also the supernatural theories, which are my favorite theories. But over time, folklore and fiction added a darker twist. Some claim that the settlers were taken by spirits or an ancient curse tied to the land. Now, these theories, though imaginative, are not grounded in any historical evidence. Now, despite centuries of study, there's no definitive evidence that has ever been found. There have been archaeological digs, especially those led by the First Colony Foundation in the 21st century, have uncovered some tantalizing clues. English pottery shards and weapons near Hatteras Island and Albemarle Sound suggest that at least some of the colonists may have been relocated. Now, in 1607, a map drawn by White was found to contain hidden symbols indicating a possible inland settlement location, adding to the mystery. Now, in 2020, a new analysis of artifacts found at Site X in Bertie County, North Carolina, about 50 miles from Roanoke, suggests that some of the colonists may have moved inland and lived among the Native Americans for some time. However, these findings still remain inconclusive. The name Virginia Dare has become a cultural icon symbolizing innocence lost in the birth of a nation yet to be. Towns, ships, and landmarks bear her name to this day, and the word Croatoan still sparks curiosity and wonder, an unfinished sentence etched into the wood into history. Now, more than 4 centuries later, the disappearance of the lost colony remains unsolved. Whether the colonists died, were absorbed by a native culture, or vanished by some other means, the truth may still lie buried beneath the centuries of sand and soil, waiting to be unearthed. I find this one so fascinating. My mother was from North Carolina, so we used to go down there every summer, spend a lot of time, and I've been to those areas. My grandfather was from Albemarle, North Carolina. So I've been to Hatteras Island and the Roanoke, and it's a great area to visit if you're into history and just kind of the weird stuff in America. Put it on your bucket list. It's a definite spot that you should visit. And the state of North Carolina, gorgeous. You're not going to be disappointed. So put it on your bucket list and go take a trip. Now, up next, as a parent, this one really gets to me. But it's the mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children. Now, on Christmas Eve in 1945, in a quiet Appalachian town in Fayetteville, West Virginia, a tragedy struck the Sodder family that would evolve into one of the most enduring, haunting, unsolved mysteries in America. Now, George was born in Italy in Sardinia and immigrated to the United States as a teenager and built a successful coal trucking business. Now, together, him and Jenny raised 10 children together in a large two-story home just outside of town. Now, the Sodders were, by all accounts, a typical mid-20th century family, tight-knit, devout, and industrious. But their lives were forever changed and divided into a before and after the fire. On the night of December 24th, 1945, the Sodders celebrated Christmas Eve like many American families. Their oldest son, Joseph, was away serving in the U.S. Army, but the remaining 9 children were at home. The other kids had been allowed to stay up a little late, playing with their toys and chatting while their parents and younger siblings retired for the night. Now, Marion, the oldest daughter at 17, had just returned home from work at the dime store. She had some surprises for her younger siblings, some new toys she bought with her paycheck, and the spirits were high. Now, at approximately 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, Jenny was jolted awake by a sound of something hitting the roof of the house, followed by a rolling noise. Now, moments later, she could smell smoke. When she opened her bedroom door, she saw flames licking the walls of the stairwell. Now, Jenny screamed for her husband and children. Chaos erupted. Now, George and Jenny, along with 4 of their children, Marion, 17, Sylvia, 2, John, 23, and George Jr., who was 16, managed to flee the burning home in their pajamas, barefoot in the snow. But however, 5 of their children remain inside. Marie's 14, Martha 12, Louis 9, Jenny 8, and Betty 5. They had been sleeping in the 2 upstairs bedrooms, and they were never seen again. Now, George Sodder sprang into action. He smashed a window. He re-entered the burning house, cutting his arm in the process. Now, inside, he found a stairwell completely engulfed in flames. The flames were so intense that he just could not get there. Now, went back outside. He raced to retrieve the ladder that he always stored next to the house, but it was missing. So then he attempted a bold move and improvised, and using his coal delivery truck as a makeshift ladder, he tried using that, but when he went to go start it, both trucks would not turn over, even though they had been working perfectly the day before. Now, some speculate that they may have been tampered with deliberately. Now, meanwhile, Marion ran to the neighbor's home to call for help. There was no operator response. Another neighbor tried as well. Still no answer. Eventually, that neighbor drove into town to track down the fire chief, F.J. Morris, in person. How sad is that? You have to track down the fire chief to get somebody to put the fire out in your house. Jeez. But despite the fire station being just 2.5 miles away, the volunteer fire department did not arrive at the scene until about 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire began. Now, Chief Morris would later claim he was unable to drive the truck and had to wait for enough volunteers that could be located and assembled. But by then, the Sodder home was nothing but smoldering rubble. Now, the initial assumption is that all 5 children had perished in the fire, yet no remains were ever found. Not a bone, not a tooth, not a trace. Fire investigators claim that the intense heat most likely cremated their bodies completely, but George and Jenny were not convinced. They found it hard to believe that a house fire, which burned for only 4 to 5 hours, could completely incinerate 5 human bodies, especially when household items such as kitchen appliances were found intact in the debris. A cremation expert later told them that even at an extreme temperature, that human bones typically do not burn in a house fire. Now, the family believed that the children may have been kidnapped rather than killed. Now, in the days and weeks after the fire, oddities and inconsistencies began to pile up. Now, the ladder that George was looking for, it was found in a ditch far from where it's usually kept. A telephone repairman told the Sodders that their phone line had been cut but not burned, a clear sign of sabotage. Now, a bus driver came forward to say that he seen a ball of fire being thrown at the roof of the house that night, possibly a Molotov cocktail. A woman claimed that she had seen the missing children peering out of a car window as it sped by from the scene of the fire. Another woman who ran a tourist stop 50 miles west of Fayetteville said she had seen 4 of the 5 children the morning after the fire, accompanied by 2 adults of Italian appearance. Yet police dismissed all these accounts as unreliable. The official stance remains that the 5 children had died in the fire, but the Sodders refused to accept that. Now, for the rest of their lives, George and Jenny Sodder conducted their own investigation. They distributed flyers, wrote letters, traveled across the country, following leads. They became obsessed with the mystery, never celebrating holidays again and never rebuilding their home. Instead, they transformed the site into a memorial garden. Now, in 1950, George even dug up the basement of the house, searching for bones. He found one that appeared to be a human vertebra. Analyzed by the Smithsonian Institute, the bone was determined to be someone over the age of 16, older than any of the 5 missing children, and showed no signs of fire damage. The bone likely came from fill dirt using during the reconstruction. Now, perhaps the most iconic symbol of their search was the billboard they erected along Route 16 in Fayetteville, bearing the photographs of all 5 children with the haunting caption, "What was their fate? Kidnapped? Murdered? Or are they still alive?" The billboard stayed up for nearly 40 years and became a local landmark. Now, some of the theories that have been bandied about over the years, now some believe the fire was mob-related, possibly linked to George's outspoken political views. He was known to be anti-Mussolini, which alienated some of the members of the Italian immigrant community. Others believe the children were possibly kidnapped and raised elsewhere, possibly sold or trafficked. Several decades later, the Sodders received an anonymous photo in the mail of a young man who resembled Louis Sodder, accompanied by a cryptic message. Now, obviously, the cover-ups and local conspiracies, because the fire department, they kind of bungled the response. They were missing equipment, and lack of proper investigation led many to believe that there may have been a cover-up, whether it was intentional or due to incompetence. But later, George Sodder died in 1969 and Jenny in 1989, never knowing what happened to their children. Their surviving children carried on the search, but no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced. The mystery of the Sodder children remains unsolved. Now, to this day, many consider it to be one of the most strangest missing person cases in U.S. history. There were no remains, no arrests, or no clear suspects. Only a house fire and 5 children who vanished into the smoke and silence. Yeah, can you imagine? You're dealing with the trauma of having a house fire and knowing that you still have 5 children inside, and you go in and there's no way to get in there. Your ladder's missing. Your truck won't start. It's taking forever for the fire department to get here. Just that, oh my God, that anxiety and that trauma, I can't imagine. And then to know that there was no trace of them, and like, what the heck? And if they were abducted, why just those 5 children? This one definitely has gone down in history as America's strangest cold case.
Now, during the Halloween season, the veil between the worlds gets thinner and the chills get real. Oh, so very real. Something is waiting in the dark, and it's calling your name. So answer the call this Halloween season for the Paranormal 60 presents Halloween Haunts and Hijinks, October 9th through the 12th, for a supernatural weekend you'll never forget. It's being held at the historic haunted Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. Join Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devil's Perch, and the host of the Paranormal 60 podcast. He's teaming up with Dalen Spratt from Ghost Brothers and Phantom Forensics. And we have heart-centered, intuitive Diet Renee for a weekend packed with spine-tingling experiences. You'll have 2 nights of live investigations and paranormal experiments, interactive workshops, gallery readings, and meet and greets,
live presentations with experts themselves. This isn't just an event, it's a doorway to the unknown. So you have to ask yourself, do you dare cross it? Now, tickets are limited, so please book your Halloween haunts and hijinks adventure now at darknessevents.com. Again, that is darknessevents.com. Up next, we are going to set sail on the high seas with the ghost ship Mary Celeste. Now it was December 5th, 1872, when a ghost ship was spotted gliding slightly across the Atlantic Ocean. Her sails ragged and her path erratic, about 4 miles east of the Azores Islands. The vessel was the Mary Celeste, an American brigantine, and she was eerily empty. No crew, no signs of struggle or distress, just an abandoned ship, adrift under a partial sail and seemingly deserted in the mid-voyage. Now, the ship was discovered by the British brig De Gratia, captained by David Morehouse, a friend and former colleague of the Mary Celeste's captain, Benjamin Briggs. Now, the two ships had departed New York within days of each other, bound for Europe. The Mary Celeste had left on November 7th, 1872, with a cargo of 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol destined to Italy. Now, on board the Mary Celeste was Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 men. By all accounts, Briggs was an experienced, devout, and cautious captain, not one to take unnecessary risks at sea. This was supposed to be a routine transatlantic voyage. Instead, it became one of history's most enduring maritime mysteries. When Morehouse's crew boarded the drifting Mary Celeste, they were stunned. The ship was completely seaworthy. There were no signs of superficial damage. Sails were torn. Ropes were hanging loosely. The main hatch was secure, but the forehatch and the lazarette were open. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the bilge area, not unusual for a ship of its size and age, but the pumps weren't working properly. Otherwise, the ship was in good sailing condition. The lifeboat was missing, as were most of the ship's navigational instruments, the ship's chronometer, sextant, and logbook. However, they found the cabin cabins intact, with valuables like sheathed swords. Personal items were untouched. The crew's quarters still contained clothing and belongings, and the galley, the food was still laid out as if the crew had just stepped away. Most chilling of all, the logbook's last entry was dated November 25th, just 9 days before the ship was discovered. It placed the vessel near Santa Maria Island in the Azores, some 400 nautical miles from where it was found. Whatever had happened had occurred suddenly, and the crew had abandoned the ship voluntarily. But why? Now, obviously, there are theories that have been bandied about. Now, the Mary Celeste was towed to Gibraltar, where a detailed salvage hearing was held. Now, during the inquiry, various possibilities were considered, but none provided a definitive answer. Now, one theory was an alcohol explosion. I mean, the cargo consisted of highly volatile, denatured alcohol used for industrial purposes. Now, some barrels were later found to be empty, specifically 9 barrels made of red oak, which is more porous than white oak. It may have theorized that the fumes may have built up and caused a small explosion or an audible whoosh that frightened the crew into abandoning the ship temporarily. Thinking the ship might catch on fire, they may have fled in the lifeboat, tied to the Mary Celeste by a rope, only for the rope to snap, leaving them adrift and lost forever. Now, this theory is supported by the lack of fire damage, the missing lifeboat, and the intact cargo. But another theory was a rogue wave or waterspout. Some maritime historians suggest that maybe a rogue wave or a waterspout may have swept over the deck, washing away part of the crew and leaving the others to panic. However, this would not explain the orderly condition of the ship and the lack of water damage inside the cabins. Now, another theory is mutiny or foul play. Now, while the idea of mutiny, piracy, and a foul play was investigated, especially since the ship's alcohol cargo might have attracted criminals, there was no evidence of violence. No valuables were missing. Captain Briggs was well respected, and there was no signs of discord among the crew before departure. Now, obviously, insurance fraud. Captain Morehouse and the the De Gratia crew received a salvage award for rescuing the Mary Celeste, which led to speculation that the entire event was orchestrated. But this theory had little evidence and doesn't explain why Captain Briggs and his family would disappear willingly. Now, paranormal phenomenon has been bandied about with this theory as well, as many great mysteries are. One of the more fantastic explanations emerged over the years: sea monsters, alien abductions, portals to another dimension, and of course, the Bermuda Triangle. However, the Bermuda Triangle theory can be dismissed outright, as the Mary Celeste was found outside that region. One of the biggest influences on public fascination with the Mary Celeste came in 1884 when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, before he created the Sherlock Holmes series, published a fictional short story called J. Habakkuk Jepson's Statement. Oh, that's a mouthful. He renamed the ship in the short story the Mary Celeste and dramatically embellished the tale, introducing elements of murder, conspiracy, and even cannibalism. Though entirely fictional, the story was so compelling that it was often mistaken for a true account, and the name Mary Celeste stuck in popular culture. Now, since then, the ship was inspired numerous documentaries, including on History Channel and National Geographic. There have been episodes of TV shows like on Unsolved Mysteries and Ancient Aliens, films and fictional retellings, countless books, essays, and academic studies. Now, the Mary Celeste was eventually sold, and she went on to have a troubled maritime career. Oh, the poor thing. Now, in 1885, she was intentionally wrecked off the coast of Haiti in a failed insurance scam. Now, there's been no trace of Captain Briggs, his wife or daughter, or any of the crew was ever found. No messages in a bottle, no lifeboats or survivors. And to this day, the fate aboard the Mary Celeste remains a haunting riddle of the sea. A ghost ship with a story no one can finish? The evidence points in many directions, but no single theory accounts for every detail. The Mary Celeste remains a perfect storm of fact and folklore, history and mystery. That's crazy. I mean, can you imagine just like coming up on this huge ship and nobody's on it? Where did everybody go? That'd be really weird. And it does sound like a Hollywood movie or something out of Pirates of the Caribbean. I find it fascinating. You should take a look. Now, up next, we're gonna go over a weird phenomena that former police officer David Paulides has been compiling or researching over the years about these missing people that are disappearing in these forests. So let's kind of delve into that case and kind of take a look. Now, there's something undeniably eerie about the silence of the forest. The way a dense fog settles between the trees, the way a trail can disappear in a blink of an eye, and how sometimes people just vanish without a trace. It's a story that repels itself across the United States and beyond. People go hiking, camping, and exploring in nature, but they never return. Families are left with questions, search teams comb the woods, but sometimes no footprints, no scent, no sign ever found again. Now, each year, thousands of people enter national forests and parks and wilderness areas. Most leave with nothing more than a sunburn or selfies, but some never return. And while it may sound suspicious, the truth is nature doesn't care how experienced you are. Take, for example, the Catherine Van Alt story. Now, in 1946, 8-year-old Catherine wandered away from her family's campsite near Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas. For 6 days, no one could find her. She vanished into the mountains. Then, almost a week later, searchers discovered her calmly sitting in a cave nearly 30 miles away from where she disappeared, uphill, no less. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicked. She simply just said, "Here I am." Her survival was nothing short of miraculous. But was it miraculous? Not really. She later said that she drank some creeks, ate berries, and found shelter in a cave. Her case is unusual, but not unexplainable. Still, stories like hers are the foundation of a growing body of modern folklore the missing 411 phenomena. Now, former police officer David Paulides had spent years compiling reports of people who vanished in national parks and remote wildernesses. His missing 411 books and documentaries highlight over thousands of cases that he believes don't add up. Now, according to Paulides, certain patterns emerge. People vanish near waters, rocks, or boulder fields. Dogs can't track their scents. Clothing is found neatly folded or removed. Victims are found at high elevations or in places already searched. Weather often changes dramatically right after their disappearance. It all sounds chilling, and it is. But here's the thing, many experts say that the mystery may not be as mysterious as it seems. Now, independent investigators and scientists have scrutinized Paulides' claim, and in 2017, an article in Skeptical Inquirer reviewed a random sample of his cases and found that most had perfectly rational explanations: accidents, exposure, medical issues, or even people found later alive. Now, data analysis Kyle Pollack ran his statistical review of Paulides' data set and concluded that disappearances were out of the ordinary compared to national averages. Many of the so called patterns, like people being found near water, were simply reflective of where people tend to hike or swim. Even more concerning, Paulides had been accused of leaving out key information like mental illness, criminal elements, or known weather conditions. And the critics say that sometimes he draws conclusions that don't stand up to scrutiny, like connecting cases because of the victim's initials or speculating about a portal activity without evidence. So, what is the truth? There's no question that some wilderness disappearances are baffling. Nature doesn't always give back what it takes. Now, some people go missing in remote, treacherous environments and are never seen again, whether it's due to wild animals, exposure, falling into hard crevices. Many of these cases are tragic, but explainable. With that said, it's human nature to want answers, to see patterns where they don't exist. And sometimes someone vanishes without a trace. But the mind can't help but wonder, was it just bad luck or something more sinister? Now, how terrifying would you be? Like you're camping your family and one of your family members wanders off and just disappears and no trace. And to find this girl 6 days later alive in a cave. Could it be a strange supernatural phenomena, finding clothes neatly folded? I don't think any forest animals are doing that unless they're in Disney. But I know it's like kind of like, oh, it's like Snow White. I have the animals come in and help do my chores. But yeah, it's a baffling thing. But yeah, probably more than likely there are explanations for a lot of these disappearances. Look, being out in the wilderness, like it says, nature does not care. You can run into mountain lions, bears. I mean, there's so much things that can are dangerous out in the wilderness that can kill you. That's why Dave is an avid indoorsman. All right, now we're gonna hit my home state. We're gonna head up north to Lake Superior, the graveyard of the Great Lakes. Now, stretching across 32,000 square miles, Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake by surface in the world. Its crystal clear waters, rugged shorelines, and towering cliffs have drawn adventurers, fishermen, and sailors for centuries. But beneath its shimmering surface lies a darker tale, a tale of storms, shipwrecks, and lost lives. Lake Superior's unforgiving weather is legendary. Sudden violent storms can whip up in erroneous waves, turning a calm day of water into a nightmare within minutes. The lake's cold temperatures, often near freezing even in the summer, make survival in the waters perilous. Now, over the years, Lake Superior has earned the chilling nickname America's Ship's Graveyard. It is believed it holds the remains of more than 800 shipwrecks, with some estimates pushing the numbers of 1,600. Of those, only 350 wrecks have been located and documented, leaving the vast majority hidden in the lake's mysterious depths. One of the most treacherous areas in the stretch of the water is near Whitefish Point in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. For centuries, the corridor of the lakes have claimed hundreds of vessels. The combination of rocky shoals, powerful currents, and sudden storms can proven deadly at times. Among these tragic stories, one stands out: sinking of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, on November 10th, 1975, the Fitzgerald was a massive freighter carrying 26,000 tons of iron ore, navigating through the fierce storm when suddenly it went down with all 29 crew members aboard. The exact cause remains a topic of debate, but the loss left a deep scar on the Great Lakes maritime history. The Fitzgerald sinking was immortalized by the haunting ballad by Gordon Lightfoot, whose lyrics captured the perilous power. The legend lives on the Chippewa and down, on the big lake they call Gitchagumi. The lake, it's said, never gives up our dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. When supper time came and the old cook came on the deck saying, "Fellas, it's too rough to feed ya." At 7 p.m., a main hatchway caved in and he said, "Fellas, it's good to know ya." The captain wired in and the water kept coming in. The good ship and crew were in peril. Later that night, when the lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But the Edmund Fitzgerald is just one chapter. The discovery of the Western Reserve in 2025 reminded us that Lake Superior still holds secrets. The steel freighter broke apart during a violent storm in 1892 and was found intact, sections resting 60 miles offshore. The lone survivor account told of waves crushing the ships, and now the wreck lies frozen in beneath its icy waters. Now, beyond the wrecks, Lake Superior's dangerous reputation is fueled by its size, sudden weather changes, and remoteness. The lake can generate up to 25-foot tall waves and winds over 70 miles per hour. And its cold waters limit survival time dramatically. Lake Superior is not just a body of water, it's a force to be respected, feared, and sometimes mourned. The stories of the shipwrecks, lost crews, and the relentless lake that had become woven in folklore of the region reminded us that nature's power, no matter how vast or seemingly serene, it can be deadly. Yeah, and if you have not been to Lake Superior, I mean, it's like looking onto an ocean. That's how big it is. It doesn't even look like a lake. I have been in Duluth in January, and yeah, you can barely survive walking across the streets. Sometimes how cold it is. I can't imagine being on Lake Superior at that time. But Duluth is a beautiful city. We had the big drawbridge up there on Lake Superior. And they do have a lot of historical museums up in the Duluth area, Wisconsin area, and up in Michigan. So if you're in that area and you've never thought to think to look at some of the maritime history of Lake Superior, go take a look. You'd be shocked of how much history that lake holds and the mysteries that are in its depths. Now, our next one, we are going to stay on a lake, but we're heading down to Georgia to Lake Lanier. And it's haunted tragedy and mystery that revolves around this lake. Now, just a short drive north of Atlanta, Georgia, lies Lake Lanier, a sprawling 38,000-acre man-made reservoir that draws nearly 12 million visitors each year seeking recreation, relaxation, and an escape into nature. Its shimmering waters and rolling shorelines offer a picturesque playground for boating, fishing, swimming, and water sports. Yet beneath the surface and its hidden shadows of its past, Lake Lanier is a place woven with tragedy, mystery, and stories of supernatural that haunt both locals and visitors alike. Now, Lake Lanier story begins in 1950 when the construction of the Beaufort Dam on the Chattahoochee River. Now, this massive project was intended for flood control and recreation, but it came at a steep cost. Entire communities, including predominantly black town of Oscarville, was displaced as their homes, farms, and roads and cemeteries were submerged beneath the rising waters. The relocation was swift and often brutal, but residents forced to leave behind their histories, their ancestors, their graves, and their way of life. Now, some cemeteries were moved, many graves were flooded or left underwater, contributing to a growing belief that the lake is cursed or haunted by restless spirits. Now, Lake Lanier has claimed more than 200 lives since it's been filled. Its reputation of Georgia's deadliest lake stems from a combination of natural hazards and human factors. The submerged hazards with the lake beneath the surface lies hidden dangers like fallen trees, sunken vehicles, submerged bridges, and remnants of old homes. Now, these underwater traps pose a serious risk to swimmers, divers, and boaters alike. Unaware of the unforeseen or unseen threats, many have found themselves tangled, trapped, or pulled under by unseen forces. Oh, that's creepy. Can you imagine if you're like swimming in Lake Lanier and you feel a hand grab your ankle? Ooh, ah. But the cold, murky waters, even in the summer months, the lake can be shockingly cold, leading to hypothermia and sometimes exhaustion. The murky depths and poor visibility make search and rescue operations extremely difficult, allowing some victims to remain missing indefinitely. Now, it's a heavy recreational lake, lots of traffic. It's one of the busiest recreational lakes in Southeast with nearly 2 million visitors annually. Now, these large crowds means more boat accidents, drownings, and mishaps, especially when alcohol and stuff is involved. Um, but the weather there is so unpredictable. I mean, sudden storms can come up with strong winds capable of tossing boats and swimmers into perilous situations without or little warning. Now, among the lake's tragedies are numerous disappearances that have never been fully explained. Now, people kayaking, swimming, or boating sometimes vanish just without a trace. One particularly chilling case occurred in 2023 when Dustin Valencia, a fit and healthy father of five, disappeared while kayaking. His kayak was found drifting empty on the lake. Days later, a body was recovered. Though investigators withheld official identification, his sudden loss shook the community and renewed fears about the lake's dangers. Now, it has a paranormal underbelly to it. Have you heard the Lady of the Lake? One of the lake's most famous legends involved this mysterious woman in white said to appear along the shoreline or on the water at dusk. Witnesses describe her as ethereal or sorrowful, sometimes seen walking silently or staring into the water. Theory suggests that she may be the spirit of a grieving widow or a victim of the lake's many drownings, forever bound to the place of her death. Now, there have been ghostly apparitions and strange lights. Visitors and locals have reported seeing unexplained orbs, shadowy figures, flickering lights over the lake at night. Now, some claim to hear distant voices, cries for help, or footsteps when no one else is around. These hauntings are often attributed to unsettled spirits buried in submerged cemeteries or lost in the water. Vanishing vehicles. There's so many stories abound when it comes to cars just mysteriously disappearing from parking lots near the lake, only to be found later submerged or damaged. In some cases, drivers have vanished with no explanation, leaving their vehicles behind. These tales add to the lake's reputation as a place where reality itself can seem warped. Now, obviously, there was some submerged cemeteries with the flooding of Oscarville and other communities. Now those graves lay underwater and their occupants disturbed and forgotten. The locals speak of eerie feelings about certain coves and inlets, which some claiming that the lake doesn't want you there. The sense of spiritual unrest and a fuel for many ghost stories and paranormal investigations. Now, while skeptics argue that many of these paranormal stories can be explained by natural phenomena, fog, light, reflections, echoes, human imagination, the legends persist, passed down through generations of keeping this mystery alive. Whether or not ghosts walk the shores of Lake Lanier, the tragic history of numerous fatalities have woven a cultural tapestry where fear and fascination coexist. For many, Lake Lanier is more than just a recreational hotspot. It's a place where past lingers just beneath the surface, where the living feel the presence of those who have never left. Now, Lake Lanier's beauty is undeniable. Its clear waters, sandy beaches, or lush surroundings create an inviting getaway. Yet it's a place where joy and danger mingle, where caution is necessary, and where respect for the lake's power is paramount. For those who venture to its shores, Lake Lanier is a reminder of nature's unpredictable might, the fragility of life, and the lingering echoes of history and mystery. Whether drawn by its recreational allure or its haunting stories, visitors leave the lake changed, aware that beneath its sunlit surface, the unknown waits. I love locations like this where there's so much folklore, where you have Native American folklore, American folklore all kind of tied in. And yeah, probably a lot of those can be explained, the deaths and missing people, but it's so cool to kind of talk about these urban legends and just kind of the fear and the fun with it. But yeah, Lake Lanier, it's a beautiful lake, but when you go on any lake, just be cautious. You are in water, so always safety first and foremost. Now, up next is one of my passions, aviation, and Malaysia flight MH370. It just vanished out of the sky. So let's take a look at this case and see what is the most plausible reason for a flight and 239 people on board just disappear. It was the early hours of March 8th, 2014. A total of 239 people boarded the Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 out of Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The red-eye flight to Beijing was routine, at least on paper. Family kissed their loved ones goodbye, business travelers checked their emails one last time, and flight attendants prepared for a standard 6-hour international route. No one could have imagined that this could be the last time the world would ever see the aircraft or the people on board. Now, Flight MH370 was a Boeing 777, and it took off at about 12:41 a.m. local time. Now, on board were passengers from 14 nations, including 153 Chinese nationals, 38 Malaysians. The cockpit was helmed by two experienced pilots, Captain Zahiri Ahmad Shah, 53, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27. The aircraft climbed steadily and was cruising at 35,000 feet as it passed into Vietnamese airspace over the South China Sea. Everything seemed normal. But at 1:19 a.m., Vietnamese controllers received the final voice communication from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370," said the co-pilot. 2 minutes later, the aircraft's transponder responsible for identifying its radar systems was manually switched off. Then it vanished from civilian radar. But MH370 did not simply just crash. In a stunning turn, Malaysian military radar later detected the aircraft making a sharp turn westward back across the Malay Peninsula before veering southwest over the Strait of Malacca. Now, after that, it turned again, this time south, into one of the most remote parts of the southern Indian Ocean. Then it disappeared completely. What followed was a global manhunt in the sky and sea, spanning multiple nations, costing hundreds of millions of dollars. The search area, based largely on satellite handshakes, a British satellite telecommunications company, covered a vast, desolate region of the Indian Ocean. Now, these pings were the only signals from the aircraft sent out after its disappearance, and they revealed that it had flown for approximately 6 hours after going dark. Despite an unprecedented underwater search covering 120,000 square kilometers of the ocean floor, no wreckage was ever found for over a year. Now, in July 2015, a flaperon, a movable piece of the wing, was discovered on the shores of Reunion Island near Madagascar. Now, it was positively identified as part of MH370 over the following years. Now, it was positively identified as part MH370. Now, over the following years, additional debris surfaced in Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, and further confirming that the plane had gone down somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. But even the physical evidence, the main fuselage, black boxes, and the final flight path remained missing. Now, absence of hard evidence has left a vacuum filled with speculation, obviously. Now, some of the most prominent theories are that it was he became a kamikaze pilot. Perhaps the most discussed theory is that Captain Zahiri deliberately taking the plane off course. A simulator found in his home showed a practice route into the southern Indian Ocean, eerily similar to the suspected flight path. Now, supporters of this theory argue that Zahiri depressurized the cabin, incapacitating the passengers and crew before flying the plane until it ran out of fuel. Now, however, Zahiri's family and many aviation experts have strongly refuted these claims, pointing out the lack of clear motive. Now, there's always a hijacking or terrorism. Early suspicions fell onto two Iranian men traveling with stolen passports, but they were later ruled out as asylum seekers. So, no terrorist group ever credibly claimed responsibility for this disappearance, making the theory unlikely, but not impossible. Now, some say there was probably a mechanical failure or fire on the plane. Some experts believe that an electrical fire or catastrophic failure knocked out communications and incapacitated the crew, leaving the aircraft on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. Yes, this doesn't explain the intentional turns or the transponder being turned off manually, but you never know. Now, some others think that there could have been a foreign military intervention or maybe a U.S. intervention. Fringe theorists suggest that the plane was shot down or captured after straying into sensitive airspace. Now, others speculate it landed on a secret location for unknown reasons. These claims, however, lack credible evidence. Now, some people think it's a cyber hijack. Some terrorists propose that possibly that MH370 was taken over remotely via hacking on an onboard avionics system. While technically possible, there's no concrete data to support this. Now, behind the speculation and lies and unrelenting grief, families of the missing have endured a decade of uncertainty. Now, annual vigils are held. Some have become outspoken advocates, pushing for new searches and demanding transparency from governments and aviation authorities. Many are still angry over the Malaysian officials initially handling the crisis, with misinformation, conflicting reports, sowing confusion in the early days of its investigation. Now, the emotional toll is unbearable. Parents lost children, children lost parents. One woman lost her entire family, her husband and two sons, who were flying to Beijing for vacation. I don't need theories, she told the press once. I just need the truth. I need closure. Now, the disappearance of flight MH370 has changed aviation, which is good, because then obviously if it crashed or whatnot, these people didn't die in vain. International aviation agencies have introduced new regulations requiring planes to report their position every 15 minutes, but it was later shortened to every 5 minutes in emergencies. Now, the tragedy also spurred the development of tracking systems that uses satellites and real-time data to prevent such a disappearance from happening again. Now, still, the aircraft's final resting place remains a mystery. Now, in 2018, a U.S. company, Ocean Infinity, conducted another deep-sea search using advanced underwater drones, but found nothing. Further searches have proposed, but not founded, yet the public remains interested. Now, in the vastness of the ocean, the wreckage remains hidden for years, maybe even forever. But until then, the question lingers like a specter in the minds of investigators, families, travelers across the world. How can a modern jetliner simply just vanish in thin air? Now, there has been speculations, and there have been kind of like armchair detectives that have gone over this case. And one lady, she even looked up Google satellite images of that area, and she actually found something that looked off on the picture. And when you look close, it almost looks like it's the Malaysian airline logo on the tail of the plane underwater. I mean, the ocean is an undiscovered country. I mean, we probably know more about space than we do about the ocean floor. So, and it's one of those places where just new discoveries, new things are always popping up. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine with the families of the flight, any type of aviation disaster is horrible, but not knowing, not recovering a body or anything has to leave these families feeling so uncertain, and just that not knowing what happened or if they are alive or not has to just be torture. I mean, what do you do when hundreds of people disappear and no one can tell you how? I mean, I need answers here. But whether it's foul play, freak accidents, government secrets, or forces we don't even understand yet, one thing is certain though. These disappearances aren't just isolated events. I mean, they're echoes, warnings, reminders that even in the world mapped by satellites, ruled by logic, mystery still has the final word. Now, thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, comments, share Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot with your fellow armchair detectives. And if you have a true crime story or anything like that, or a theory of your own with any of these stories that we discussed tonight, please email me at mysteriesmayhemandmerlot@gmail.com, or you can hit up my link tree. That's where all my social media is, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, I guess it's called. It's so weird saying X. I prefer Twitter. But anyway, all of my social medias, my websites, my Love and Lotus Tarot. You can find everything you need to know about all things Winnie at my link tree, which is in today's description. So please subscribe, share, comment, email me. And I just want to grow my audience, and I need your guys' help to do that. But I thank you for all the support that you've given me this year. Well, it's going on a year and a half now, I think. But yeah, it was a fun episode to do. It's just so intriguing to me, like some of these folklores and urban legends and what's true and what's not true. But it does beg the question, like, how do groups of people go missing, vanish, and what can we do to prevent those kind of things from happening again? Obviously, the aviation industry has added to it with preventing lost aircraft. But what can we do about the oceans as well, and the regulations that we can have so we don't have any more ghost ships floating around the ocean? But thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.